All right, we are live. Welcome to the Leadership Germantown Alumni Association Candidate Forum for the Alderman candidates for the City of Germantown. I want to welcome everyone that is watching from home tonight. We do not have an audience due to COVID-19 policies and procedures, but we are glad that you are tuning in now, or maybe you are watching the link a little bit later on. But thank you for being engaged in your community, and we hope that you enjoy what we have planned for you tonight. My name is Natalie Williams, and I am the president of Leadership Germantown Alumni Association. Our organization is a nonprofit. We are nonpartisan, non-political. We seek to engage the Leadership Germantown graduates in ways for continuing leadership opportunities in our community. The purpose of tonight is to allow our candidates a chance to say who they are, their vision for the city, why should you vote for them? And we are very fortunate to have several people that contributed to bringing this together tonight. We had a committee of LGAA members that started work back in February. And so I'm definitely appreciative for everything they have done to get tonight together. A lot of the folks up here at City Hall have helped us initially get this set up, but then with COVID have helped us be able to continue with this event that we've put on for many years. So we are very thankful for everyone at the City of Germantown and what they've done to make tonight possible. Our moderator, Mr. Richard Ransom, who you will meet very soon, we appreciate his time and his volunteer hours and talent in coming tonight. And I want to thank all of our candidates. We have 7 candidates here tonight, and I appreciate them taking the time to prepare and during a very busy campaign season, carving out some time to be here. So I think I want to thank them as well. The process to get this together started last December with reserving chambers. We had a committee form in February. In February, we contacted our moderators and got them on the books. As candidates pulled petitions throughout the summer, we immediately sent them save the date letters so they could be here tonight, and we are fortunate they are all able to be here. Once petitions were approved and the filing deadline passed, they received an invitation to a Zoom meeting with myself and Mr. Ransom, along with guidelines for tonight, which Mr. Ransom will go over shortly. And we went over all of that together at our Zoom meeting, and we find ourselves here tonight. So this has been a long process, but I think that tonight is going to go very well due to the efforts of so many people. Again, our moderator tonight is Mr. Richard Ransom. He is an anchor for Local 24 News here in Memphis. You typically see him in the evening hours, and we are very lucky to have him with us here tonight. He is going to kind of discuss the ground rules and logistics here shortly. Last thing I want to say is to say thank you to you. Our organization is going to donate money on your behalf to Madonna Learning Center, because I understand that is one of your favorite charities here locally.
That's great news. Thank you.
So we are proud to do that as a thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Natalie. Congratulations to Leadership Germantown Alumni Association for putting this on, despite all the obstacles that we had to deal with to get here. But the democratic process shall not stop, and we're going to keep going. And I think this is a good opportunity for citizens to figure out who they're going to vote for. We have all new faces, all 3 positions. There's not one incumbent running, so I think that makes it even more important. And I think for a lot of folks who are busy with their families and their jobs, they see the yard signs start popping up in their yards, and there are all these names, and they don't know who in the heck they're going to vote for. It's probably a failing on my profession that we don't look into it a little more in depth than we do, and it's even a little bit confusing. I don't think people know, and I'm going to give you a little lesson now. If you're watching at home, you will get to vote for all 3 positions, positions 3, 4, and 5. There is no geographic boundary to the alderman positions. There are 5 of them, and 3 are up for election this time, and so you get to vote in all 3 races. So these 2 candidates we're going to start with for position 3 chose to run in position 3, but you could have chosen 4 or 5, just to make that clear. All right, let's talk about the rules next. There will be a maximum of 1 minute allotted for each response to each question. The timekeeper will start the clock when the first word of the response is spoken. Less time spent on each response obviously will allow we can get more questions in, but that's up to you. The first respondent to each question will be alternated between the candidates. The candidates will have visible indications. There will be signs that gives them a time reference about how much time they have before the time is up. And there's also a sign that says stop, meaning the time is really up, and that's when I'll probably interrupt you or at least let you finish your thought, but that's it. I will reserve the right to ask follow-up questions. If I feel like there's something hanging out there in your response that merits a follow-up, I will ask a follow-up, and I will interrupt a candidate if I determine the response is becoming incendiary or is off-topic or too personal. Each candidate may give a closing statement, will give a closing statement up to 90 seconds, so you can kind of summarize why you want people to vote for you. So we should also point out that we're going to try and keep the position 3 and 5 forums to about 30 minutes apiece because there are 2 candidates. The position 4 forum will probably go a little bit longer, just depends on how the questions are answered. And we should also tell you at home that the candidates for the position 4 and position 5 forums that will be coming up later tonight, they are stowed away in an airtight room like we were joking about, like Family Feud, and they cannot hear the questions, so they will not have any edge in preparation for the questions that I'll be asking, and I'll try to keep them mostly the same from seat to seat. So we had a drawing on how this was all going to play out, and for seat 3, we want to introduce SHERRIE HICKS and Terri Johnson, who are the 2 candidates running for that position 3 seat. And Ms. Hicks, you get the first question since we did all this by earlier when we flipped the coin. And then it'll be Ms. Johnson, and then we'll flip it back and forth after that. So the first question I want to ask kind of deals with what I was saying earlier. You know, people see all the signs, they wonder who are these people. If you could, take your time here to just talk about why you're running and also what separates you from your opponent, why you think they should choose you versus your opponent. So Ms. Hicks, I'll start with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard Ransom, for being here tonight and for moderating, and thank you to Leadership. It's on. Thank you to Leadership Germantown Alumni Association for hosting tonight. A little about me. I'm a graduate of University of Tennessee Martin. I work for Federal Express. My husband and I met in Nashville and moved here to Germantown 27 years ago. And I realized early on this was a special place and I wanted to be an active part of this community. Why I've become involved, and it's too long for this 60 seconds, but you can see it on my website. I've served in my neighborhoods, our communities, our church, and our schools. And through the experiences I had volunteering in this community, I have tremendous insight into what is required to operate a successful city of this size. And that's one thing that sets me apart is my length of service in our community. Running for alderman is the next natural step in my service to this community. And just as I advocated for my neighbors, I will advocate for the citizens of Germantown. I want what is best for Germantown, and I want to ensure that future generations have the same great experiences that my family had here in Germantown.
All right, Terri Johnson, your turn. What distinguishes you and why are you running?
Thank you, Richard. As a mom of 5 children, I can definitely say that my patience level and my negotiating skills are off the charts, and that should bode well in service if I'm elected as your next alderman. Much like SHERRIE, I have spent years in Germantown volunteering at my children's schools. I think I've had a child in almost every school in Germantown at some point over the years, volunteered, served on PTA boards, that kind of thing. Probably my most important work that I've done in my professional life and my personal life is my advocacy work. I have advocated for Alzheimer's patients. I have advocated for cardiology patients. I've advocated for the American Heart Association. I've attended legislative sessions to learn more about what I can do in my advocacy efforts. And my most proud moment was testifying on Capitol Hill about my work with the Paycheck Fairness Act. Nancy Pelosi's committee actually asked me to provide a conservative voice for the Paycheck Fairness Act, and I was happy to do that, happy to represent women all across our country, and I'm very proud of what I was able to accomplish there.
Much has been written about the 3-2 split on the Board of Aldermen. 3 votes that tend to go for what the administration is pushing and Mayor Palazzolo, 2 that have, by and large, been opposed to whatever those questions might come before the board. Do you feel like you would align with either side there? Do you hope to change which side has the 3 and which side has the 2? Ms. Johnson, you first.
You know, that's an interesting question. I've had many people ask me about the 3-2 vote, and in my opinion, that should never happen. As an alderman, your job, as I see it, is to listen to the people of Germantown, to take each individual situation independently, review it, study it, and make a decision based on what you and your constituents think. I can't see that a continual 3-2 vote is doing service to the community of Germantown. What that tells me is that nobody is consistently seeking opinions from the city. And I think that's what we need. I think we need to act independently as aldermen. I shouldn't vote the same way as certain aldermen every time. There should be times when I act independently, and that's what I promise to do.
Okay, Ms. Hicks, what's your response to that question?
Thank you. One of the things that we do need to watch in our community is trust in our elected officials, and that's something I think that could be improved upon greatly. Respect for fellow members and some decorum that might have been lacking in the past, I'd like to see brought back to our board. And one example I can give you of how I am inclusive and am an independent voice is when I was PTA president, before I would take that position, I asked that the board make a vote to allow all members to join in or be included in our membership meetings. Prior to that, it was just board members. But I welcome a different opinion. I bring a different opinion. We make better decisions when we have different opinions brought to the table. It's a better outcome. So I do welcome that, and I would be a very independent voice on that board.
Apartments is an issue that has crept up in the last time I did this, and it's still an issue. I see it in your emails and literature. I remember last time a distinction being made between standalone apartment developments and apartments that are part of a mixed-use retail type thing, and then some that would not like to see any apartments of any kind anywhere that are developed or new. Let me ask both of you where you stand on that. I know there was an ordinance, I should say, that the alderman did approve that said it was pretty restrictive. It did limit it to mixed use. There will be no more standalone apartments built in Germantown, at least according to the previous Board of Aldermen. I guess that could be changed. Pretty restrictive on the fact that they must retain their value in terms of how the developments are built. And I just wonder if you think that's enough, or do you think it needs to be more restrictive? Ms. Hicks, where do you stand?
Well, the good news is, in the last 20 years, there's only been 1.5 apartment complexes built in Germantown. And I say 0.5 because the Avenida, the 55 plus, some people count it, some people don't, so I cut it down the middle. But 1.5 apartment complexes in Germantown is a fair number. Thornwood and Avenida were the 2. But I did support the elimination of future standalone apartments. I don't see that as being something that is of value to our city going forward. But my concern with any development is the protection of our schools. We have to make sure that our schools are not overrun.
Okay, Ms. Johnson, where do you stand?
Thank you for that question. That is a very big deal in Germantown these days, and I can tell you I'm not against apartments or people who live in apartments. What I am against are new apartments. We have a variety of apartment options in Germantown now, including the very high-end apartments at Thornwood. But it's evident, as I'm talking with voters each day, as I'm walking our neighborhoods, it's evident that our community doesn't support the idea of having more apartments for a variety of reasons. Demand isn't that high. I'm also concerned about that. We are not at capacity yet with Thornwood. 51 out of our 251 apartments at the residences are not occupied as of yet, and 16 out of the 25 lofts are still not occupied. So along with the issues, the additional money that apartments bring, there's just not the demand, and I don't see a need for them in the future.
Okay, so it would be, you would include mixed use when you say no apartments, you would include mixed use in that. That means you would vote against the Carrefour project and others like that.
Mixed use by definition is a commercial component on the ground floor and usually a residential component on the remaining floors and building up. And again, the citizens are not for that kind of development, and so I would not be for that kind of development as either.
Full disclosure, I live in Thornwood. I'm in the lofts. I can tell you there's a lot fewer, there are a lot more, lot fewer vacancies than you indicated. There's 3 that I'm aware of.
That was according to the website as of this afternoon.
Okay, it may not have been updated then. So anyway, if you do any travel, you go to other cities. Most recently for me would be Dallas, Denver, Washington, D.C. You go, and you know mixed use is really very popular right now. Personally, I love it. I enjoyed being a homeowner. It was great. I've had 7 of them, but I'm at a stage of my life where I like not having to worry about gutters and lawns and replacing hot water heaters and all that fun stuff. But I wanted to stay in Germantown. And when you travel around, that's what you see is a lot of this kind of thing. It's convenient. You like going to the restaurants down below, et cetera. Why not give more citizens that option if that's what they choose? When you think about the fact that the city, as it is currently zoned, 90% is residential and 10% is for projects or retail, what's wrong with approving the projects that are in the pipeline now for that kind of development? Ms. Johnson?
It's a great question, Richard, and I think the appropriate answer to that question is, as an alderman, it's not up to me to decide that. It's up to me to find out what our citizens want and act on their behalf. Mixed use has a connotation that people here don't want right now. I've done a lot of door knocking, a lot of talking to constituents who don't want more apartments, period. I don't think anybody's against development. More restaurants, more specialty boutiques, more retail, that kind of thing is something that everyone can get on board with. I think where mixed use comes into question, are the apartments, and that's what people are concerned with. They're concerned for the wear and tear to our infrastructure. They're concerned with the strain it might put on city services, our first responders, as well as our schools, and that's something we have to consider.
Ms. Hicks?
As you pointed out, we are 90% residential. If we built completely out today, we'd still be 90% residential. So what we're talking about is a very small part of our community. And development is my home, your home. It's Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, Apple Store. It's those contained development. But they bring, they're an amenity to our city. I like having Apple Store and Trader Joe's and Whole Foods. And not only are they amenity, but they bring sales tax revenue to our city too. And that helps us offset the costs of our infrastructure and for our schools. So the contained growth is actually something that I do support here in Germantown.
Got a question from one voter who said that there are still, even though we are pretty much landlocked right now in our development, there are still large parcels of family-owned land in Germantown. And when parcels are ready to come up for sale to developers, oftentimes citizens object to that. And this person wanted to know, do people have a right and privilege to sell their own property to who they want to? Ms. Hicks?
Yes. I don't know how else to, yes.
Okay, well, I like short answers. Ms. Johnson, where do you stand on that? You understand the concern, of course.
Well, the simple answer is yes. If it is your property, you have a right to sell it to whoever. I would hope that people would take into consideration those that live around the property, but that's in a perfect world, and it's not always the case, and we don't always get to make those decisions. But the simple answer to your question is yes.
Also, lots of questions about cell phone coverage. We know that there is a new tower going up near Dogwood Elementary. It has not, I don't believe they've even started building it yet, but it's gone through the approval process. As I understand it, the FCC has given its okay. So it's just a matter of time, and that should help folks who live in that area with dropped calls and that issue. I see it happen all the time with my cell phone. It's a common complaint in Germantown. I'm sure you've heard about it as you knocked on some doors. So, Ms. Hicks, you first on this one. Is enough being done there to address this? If the purpose of government is to help citizens with some basic things like that, and we're talking being able to call 911 too, not just, you know, your kid and make sure they've made their bed. What can we do about that? How can that get better?
There's also been a cell tower just approved at Wolf River Boulevard and Germantown Road, so that'll help over there with that specifically for that medical corridor. But we do need that as part of the Germantown Forward 2030. One of the metrics is cell phone coverage, and it does lack. And in the city, even measures itself in that metric and says that we are lacking in that area. So I think you're seeing a focused effort to bring more cell towers in. There's another one at Neshoba that's not been put up at Neshoba and Riverdale. So there's forward motion on that, but it's just not been built. As you pointed out, the one at Dogwood has not been built. But yes, we do need to have basic cell coverage. That is a safety issue for all citizens. They need that for medical devices, and they need that to call 911.
Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Richard. Absolutely, as Ms. Hicks said, it is a safety issue to not have cell coverage, and you are correct. As I've been talking with voters, it has been mentioned every single day. Many of us in Germantown stand outside our homes to talk on our phones, and we wave to our neighbors who are also standing outside to talk on their phones, because the reality is most people don't have a home phone anymore. So that is an issue. It's something we need to work on. The bigger issue, I think, is where we place those cell phone towers, and I think we could probably come up with better places than the backyard of an elementary school. I'm happy that cell phone towers are going in, but I'm disappointed that Ms. Hicks recused herself from that vote, because that did not tell people where she stood on that, and that is a real issue with the parents at Dogwood Elementary.
All right, Ms. Hicks, I'll allow you to respond.
Thank you. I voted twice for that cell tower, so it's clear where I stand on that. That was a tough decision, because there were so many people that were upset about it. And I'll tell you what I said in that meeting was, we don't know. We don't know whether cell phone coverage is harmful. We just don't know. I know there's debate on both sides, but what we do know is that people need 911. We do know that someone's going to need 911 in that area. So I did vote for that cell tower, and I do support that cell tower.
Okay, and we should also tell voters at home that hopefully with the 5G development, the towers are a lot less obtrusive, and hopefully cell service will get better too with that. Another question for you. If COVID continues and tax revenues continue to decline, or shortfalls are identified in the city's operating budget or pension liabilities, how aggressive would you be before resorting to a tax increase? For example, would you increase taxes to address shortfalls as a primary means of addressing the situation, or would you look at cutting funding to administrative areas of the budget or funded groups such as GPAC or the Chamber of Commerce before raising people's taxes? I think it's your turn first, Ms. Hicks. No, I'm sorry, it's Ms. Johnson.
COVID has absolutely affected our community and our world, for that matter, and we absolutely must be sensitive to the needs of those who have been affected the most. But I guess I would ask, why would we ever have to have a tax increase when we clearly afford on a yearly basis so many nice-to-have things that aren't necessary to have things? I would absolutely want to explore alternative revenue sources before we did anything to raise taxes on the taxpayer, because that's not what we want to do. We can look at federal and state grants. We can look at public-private partnerships. We can talk to our lobbyists and our legislators to ensure that we are capturing the internet sales tax and it's returned here to Germantown like we need. I think there are things we can tighten up in the budget before we even think about looking at a tax increase.
Ms. Hicks?
I would not support the tax increase, but here's why. We are actually, with COVID, we did see a drop in sales tax revenue, but we are primarily dependent on property tax in this community, so that does help stable things. The loss in sales tax that we saw through COVID is actually being recovered. We're seeing that for September, the sales tax numbers are on par, if not ahead of where they were last year for this month. So we're hopefully not even talking about having a sales tax increase, so I would not support that.
Okay. Moving on to the Germantown Country Club property. I was surprised at the number of questions about that, honestly. The offer on the table, as I understand it, is that it will be a single-family development. So the questions were more along the line of, what are you going to do to make sure that that's what it is as this project moves forward? Ms. Hicks? The Germantown Country Club is a special place, and when I talk to people, I bet it comes up 3 out of 4 times too. It's very interesting, and I like asking, what would you put there? And that's been a different answer too.
As you know, what we've read in the paper, that will be residential supposedly. That's what the developer has said he wants to do. My concern with, like I said earlier, with anything is that the impact on schools. But I did people saying they hope it retains the golf course character and the charm of what it was. And I don't know how that can be done, but that was the one comment I had. So my concern is on the schools and how that development could impact them.
Okay, Ms. Johnson.
Yes, I often hear questions about the GCC. It is the absolute heartbeat of our town. People are very concerned about what's going to happen with that property. I think that's exactly why this election is so important. This property is in the heart of Germantown, surrounded by nice homes, all residential area. I'm very happy with what I've seen with the preliminary plans. I believe the plans are 2,500 to 6,500 square foot homes that will touch a variety of different lifestyles, and I can absolutely get on board with that. I guess I would say I'm cautiously optimistic. This is something that will come up before the new board, and I'm hoping that we can ensure that it stays a residential area for the sake of everyone, including those who live around it.
Talking about Germantown city government and how it's run, we know that our police are constantly rated among the best in the state. Our community is among the safest in the state. Our roads are in very good shape. We have a AAA bond rating. Our schools are among the best in the state, if not the best. I know the highest ACT score over at Houston High School. The Baldridge Award that the city received is being one of the best well-managed local governments. Would you concur with what the painting I'm painting here, that the portrait I'm painting, that things are really in pretty good shape and there's a lot to be proud of as far as what's going on in the administration of this city? Ms. Johnson?
I would say there's a great deal to be happy with in this city. Germantown's a great place to live and a great place to raise your family. All of the things you said are outstanding. I looked at the home sales data from August, and that is even more impressive. 106 homes sold with a median price of $409,000. That's an 8% increase from 2019. So that's huge. That's what the schools, home values, safety, that's what brings people here. Excuse me. I do think we have a trust issue within our government. That's not to say they're not doing a good job. That's not to say there's anything going on. I think what there is a lack of transparency and perhaps a lack of communication. And when you don't communicate frequently, people tend to use that or take that in a negative way. So I think we can do better with communication, open dialogue, and transparency.
Ms. Hicks, your assessment of how the city is run.
I'm ready to jump out of my chair and agree with you because, yes, this is an awesome community. This is, and we have everything. We have streets, safe streets. Our police here are 3 minutes. Our ambulance service gets here in 7, which is cut in half from what it used to be, and that literally saves lives. The school system that you mentioned, the highest ACT scores in the state, our quality of life is unmatched anywhere else. Yes, I am ready to, it is amazing what we have, but it wasn't given to us. It was not an accident for us to be in this place. And we have to be careful and make sure that going forward, we continue to build on those qualities that make everybody want to live here.
I'm going to give you the next question about schools, since we're kind of on that topic. I think the city, since the Germantown Municipal School District was formed in 2014,
Fall.
$60 million from the city's funds have been given to the school system. Do you think the city should contribute more or less than it currently is to keep the school system and help improve the school system? Ms. Hicks?
Schools are the top reason, and when I ask people why you move here, it's the first or second thing out of their mouth. Why did you move here? Schools or property values. So while I'm not running for school board, I understand that having great schools really does impact the property values here in Germantown. So as far as where we go from here, we need to be respectful and make sure that the schools have the tools they need. When I was PTA president at the middle school, I saw firsthand the need for more classrooms at the middle school. So we do need to make sure that they have the funds that they need to keep their standing in the state.
Ms. Johnson?
I'm going to agree. The schools are the number one reason people come here to Germantown. That's why everyone wants to live in Germantown, so they can put their children in the best schools in the state. I think we should do everything that is humanly possible to support our schools. I don't think, again, I'm not running for school board either, but I think we should work as a board of aldermen very closely with the school board, have regular meetings. I think the average parent would be really surprised how much money your PTAs put into the schools, and that's parent money. That's always something that astounded me when I was on the PTA board at Farmington Elementary. Parents pay a lot of the bill for a lot of the things and technology we're able to have. So absolutely, I think our city should support our schools in any and every way we can.
One more school question. Would you, as an alderman, support making a more focused effort to acquire the SCS Germantown named schools? Ms. Johnson? Or has that ship left the barn, so to speak? I mean, is there any hope that we could actually buy the schools from the county school system?
That's a good question. I don't think we'll ever stop trying to have those schools. I think there is a very deep hurt still over losing those schools, and I don't think we'll ever stop trying. Whether that is a reality or not remains to be seen. You know, I don't know if that's a pipe dream or if that's something that can be achieved, but I don't believe we'll ever stop trying.
Ms. Hicks?
Our oldest son was a graduate of Germantown High School in the spring of 2014. He was the last Shelby County School graduate from Germantown High, and I saw my fellow parents of the 11th graders and 10th graders agonizing on whether to leave their children at Germantown or move to Houston. That was a terrible, terrible time for those parents, and I wish we had all 8. I wanted all 8 then. I still want all 8 now. As a parent, I want all 8 because I want to be able to work with all those schools, but as an alderman, I want control of the land and those buildings because they're within our borders.
Okay. It is time now for your closing remarks. As I mentioned at the top of this, you each get 90 seconds to do so. We held a drawing to decide who would go first on this. And Ms. Hicks, you chose, or Ms. Johnson chose to go last. Ms. Hicks, you go first.
Thank you. And we've already talked about it, but I'll say it again. We here in Germantown have a unique and a rare combination because we have it all. We have the safest streets, we have the highest rated schools in the state, and we have a quality of match that is unmatched anywhere else in this region. Everybody wants to be here, but like I said before, getting to this point was not an accident, and it did not just fall into our laps. Experience matters. My volunteerism in this community gives me a tremendous insight into what it takes to operate a successful city of this size, and just as I advocated for my neighbors, I will advocate for all the citizens of Germantown. I am not anyone's lackey. I am not a politician. I have never run for office before. I'm an independent voice, and I want to ensure that future generations enjoy the same safe streets and strong schools and the quality of life that our family has enjoyed. I ask for your vote and your support.
Terri Johnson.
Thank you, Richard. In the years that I've been around politics, I have seen and observed that there are basically 2 types of people who run for office. Those who want a title and those who have a servant's heart. Those who have a title will usually tell you every position they've ever had, every board they've ever been on, every organization they've ever been a part of. And that's okay. A candidate with a servant's heart will tell you things like, I want to listen to you. I want to understand you. I want to make decisions and act with your best interest in mind. I told a friend the other day, I'm in this race because I have a passion to come here and make a difference in my town. I'm not a candidate. I'm more of a crusader. Resumes and accolades are great. Quoting all of the fun facts about our city is a great thing, but that's not what this is about. This is about electing the best alderman for our city. An alderman should have integrity, should always be willing to listen, should be transparent, should do what the people want, and should not be beholden to any particular group, interest, or political power circle. There's a clear distinction between myself and my opponent. This is a very easy choice for every voter in Germantown. If I haven't yet earned your vote, I'm asking you for the opportunity to talk face-to-face, to answer your questions, and to earn your support. Thank you.
All right, thanks both of you for taking part in this forum tonight. We appreciate it very much. Folks, if you're watching at home, we're going to take a quick break, clean things up a little bit, do our sanitizing, and then the Germantown Position 4 candidates will be here. They include John Paul Miles, Rod Motley, and Brian UELEKE will be here as well. So hope you'll join us shortly. All right, we are back now for position 4, and the 3 candidates that are taking part in that contest, John Paul Miles, Rod Motley, and Brian UELEKE. We appreciate all 3 of you gentlemen being here tonight and taking part of this, and for even wanting to run for office, because that's taking on quite a task already, as you already know by now, I'm sure. we're going to try and ask pretty much the exact same questions that I asked in position 3, and we'll do it again in position 5, so there's not a lot of difference between them unless there's a follow-up question that's warranted or what have you. But you know the rules, so we'll just go ahead and get started. And what I started with the two ladies running for seat 3 is trying to take the point of view of the average Germantown voter who is working. My husband and wife work, they're taking care of the kids, they see the signs suddenly start popping up in the yards and wonder, well, who the heck are they, and why, how am I supposed to make up my mind? And so I wanted to at least make the first question, it's a bit of a softball, but tell folks what it is you think is more important for them to know about why you're running, and follow that by what distinguishes you from the other two names in the case of position 4 that they have to consider. Mr. Miles, you get the first question and the first response.
Thank you for the question. I'm John Paul Miles. I've been a resident of Germantown since 1988. What got me involved in Germantown politics is back in 2015 there was a road realignment that really would impact historical old Germantown. I was one of the first citizens to be involved with that initiative to fight it. I showed up to the BMA meeting back in 2015. I was a citizen to be heard. And I just really started to pay attention to the direction of our city, where it was going. As a result of that road realignment citizens group I was a part of, we were able to stop that realignment from becoming a part of Germantown. It was a thoroughfare that would have just impacted West Street in historical old Germantown. Ever since then, I've noticed things change in Germantown as far as development's concerned, and I'm really concerned about mixed-use, high-density apartments coming to Germantown. I want to make sure that Germantown remains the Germantown I grew up in, which is a small, quiet, safe residential community.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Motley, Rod Motley, why are you running and what distinguishes you?
Yes, thank you. I'm running actually, my name is Rod Motley, and I'm a 17-year service provider for UPS. And during the last 6 months during this pandemic, not only have people in my industry, we've been called upon to a higher standard to produce for the environment and what's going on during this issue. And me and my family, we stayed and we moved, we're actually in Germantown for 3 things. And those 3 things are the great communities, the safe neighborhoods, and the amazing first responders that we have in Germantown. And I want to continue to build on that and make sure Germantown stays amazing the way it is.
Mr. UELEKE.
Thank you. I am Brian UELEKE. I have lived here for several years. My wife and I have owned 2 homes in Germantown, and we have 2 kids in the school. The education is very important for me. The standard of living that we have in Germantown is very important. I appreciate the public safety and the strong services that we have here. And what distinguishes me is that I have 17 years of experience in strategic financial planning at FedEx. I have spent the last 17 years working with different people across the company, helping them to understand how to make hard decisions, how to ask hard questions, working through limited resources, and our city has limited resources, so I think we need somebody who understands how to manage the budget, how to take care of things, and make sure that we're appropriately allocating our funds.
All right, very good, thank you. Mr. Motley, you get the first question now, or the next question, I should say, first answer. Much has been made of the 3-2 split on the Board of Aldermen. 3 votes that, by and large, almost without exception, seem to go with the administration, Mayor Palazzolo, the city administrator, and then 2 who are often opposed to whatever the administration might support. What are your thoughts, number 1, about the split, and number 2, are you prepared to tell voters who want to know where you're more likely to fall, where you see yourself voting more often than not?
Well, for me, when I'm on this Alderman board, I will always go with the direction of the citizens first. That's the most important thing to me. And then I will always go, the next step would be to consult with the Alderman board, and we will always make the best decision going forward as far as Germantown is concerned.
So you're not prepared to say one way or the other. You're going to be an independent.
I'm going to be strictly for the taxpayers of Germantown.
Okay. Brian Ulicky, where do you stand on this 3-2 split? What do you think about it, number one, and where would you be prepared to say you're inclined to vote?
So I stand with the people of Germantown. I am independent. I have run my own campaign, and I believe that it is important to listen to the people of Germantown. The 3-2 split has been frequent, but it's probably not as frequent as most would expect it is. I think it's important that we engage early in the process as aldermen, that we're working with the commissions and the boards around the city to help shape legislation. And I think as long as the aldermen are engaged early and helping to communicate the programs and things that are coming before the board, we help shape that, and we reduce the number of 3-2 split votes there are, because our input is included in what's presented to the board. That's an important part of the process, and I think that's what everybody who runs for office needs to be ready to do, is engage in the process to help shape the legislation that becomes before the board.
Okay, and John Miles, your thoughts about the 3-2 split and where you would stand?
Yeah, again, as a member of the road realignment that fought that, I want to make sure that citizens' voices are being heard. The citizens stood up, and I want to make sure that whatever development we put in Germantown benefits everyday Germantown residents. Quiet, safe residential community. That's how I'd vote.
Okay. Brian Ulicky, you get this next question first, and it concerns apartments. You probably hear questions about this every once in a while on the campaign trail, I'm assuming. My understanding is that the way what the city has adopted at this point is that apartments that are part of a mixed-use development will be considered, but standalone apartments will not be considered. It's forbidden at this point. Are you okay with that, or do you want no more development, even mixed use, as far as apartments are concerned?
I'm glad that we won't be having standalone apartments anymore. That is I think, good thing that has come out of the apartment moratorium, is that we have removed that. I think as a community, we must be very cautious about the mixed-use proposals that come before the board. I think it's important that when we have proposals that are mixed-use, that we understand the impacts that those are going to have on the community, that we understand how many students are going to come out of that, so that we don't overburden our schools. So what the infrastructure impacts are, as far as the water and the drainage that's going to come off of it, the sewage needs, things like that require investment from the city, that we're making sure that we understand those things as we review those processes, because the laws right now allow those mixed uses, and unless we get together and work to change that, we're going to have to make sure that we shape whatever is put into our community, that it fits the needs of Germantown.
Mr. Miles?
Yes, a study came out in 2016 the city paid for, the Tischler-Buy study. The Tischler-Buy study found that the revenues that mixed-use apartments and developments would bring to our community won't impact our community until 20 years after they're built. So it's very important to weigh in the costs and the consequences of a mixed-use development in Germantown. I think it puts a lot of strain on the residents as far as, we're already overpopulated with schools, our drainage, our sewage, our infrastructure. We want to make sure that whatever costs we incur with mixed-use development, we're able to balance that, and we're able to stop it.
Let me follow up with that. Full disclosure, I'm a resident of Thornwood and love it. I was a homeowner, had 7 homes, and don't miss one bit being a homeowner. And was glad that Germantown offered that kind of living for me and my wife, because that's just what the stage of life that we're in, I guess. So I want to pin you down a little bit more. When it comes to this kind of development, what is it that you're opposed to exactly? And can you declare whether you'd vote up or down on the next one that's in the pipeline, and that's the Carrefour plan?
Yes, anything that's high population density, I would vote against. I would vote against Carrefour.
Okay. Mr. Motley?
Yes, I will vote against it. And not only that, saying that is, I actually stay in an apartment. And during the time of the pandemic, when it first broke out, me and my wife, we were looking to move into a house, actually. But unfortunately, we weren't able to, since she lost her job during the pandemic. So going forward, I'm worried about the student-to-teacher ratio and the overdevelopment and the overcrowding that we're dealing with right now, and I don't want it to continue.
All right, and Mr. Ulicky?
I think it's important as we are looking at project that we understand those impacts. Like you said, you live in Thornwood, and the last I heard out of Thornwood was there was one student who came from.
I was going to say, I haven't met that student, but maybe there is one.
So a development like Thornwood does not necessarily stress our infrastructure the same way. But we have to do thorough analysis. I think the apartment moratorium gave us some great data to understand and look at and evaluate projects. I think we need to be very smart about that, and making sure part of what makes Thornwood work from that perspective is that it is high-end. It is the capacity of the apartments. They're 1 and 2 bedroom apartments as opposed to 3 and 4 bedrooms, where you end up with more strain on the system from those types of things. So I think it's just really important that we look at the proposal before we make a decision.
All right, Mr. Motley, you get this next question. This was from, we offered voters the chance to send in emailed questions, and I'm using several of them tonight. One question was about, it's a development-related issue. There are some large parcels of family-owned land in Germantown. Yes, Germantown is mostly landlocked, but there are some pretty big pieces of land that has been in those families for generations and generations, I assume. When those parcels are ready to come up for sale to developers, in the past, citizens have really objected. Do people have a right and the privilege to sell their own property to whoever they want?
I feel like they do have a choice to have their own decision, but I do also believe that the citizens of Germantown, the main thing that we need to focus on is not only issues that are happening now, but what's going to happen to our next generation that's coming behind us. And I believe that thinking about not overdeveloping, that would be a key thing for us to think about.
All right, Mr. UELEKE?
Yes, people have property owner rights to sell their land. What we have in place are codes and zoning that restrict the uses of that land, and we have boards and commissions that help review those projects as they come forward to the city. And I think it's very important for us to have a strong check and balance in place with those boards and zonings that review the projects, make sure that they meet the standards of our community, but respect the rights of property owners to develop and invest in their own property.
And John Paul Miles.
Property owners have the right to sell their property, but they also have to be in conformity to the zoning of commissions and city codes. So as long as they're in conformity with city codes and commissions, they have that right.
Okay. All right, Brian, you get this next question first, and it concerns something I'm sure you've heard a lot about as well, cell towers, cell phone reception more specifically. We know that there is a couple of towers in the works, Dogwood Elementary, and then I think I learned in the last session one over by the medical corridor. What can you say is your personal commitment to try and improve cell phone service in Germantown, which is notoriously awful?
Yes. Full disclosure, I have 2 children that are students at Dogwood Elementary. But at the same time, I understand that cell phone coverage is a safety issue for our community. The vast majority of the calls that come into 911 are from cell phones. So cell phone coverage is very important to our community for a public safety perspective. When the floods happened over near Dogwood, the city brought in a external cell on wheels to provide supplemental coverage for the employees of the city that were working in there to make sure that they had coverage. My father was working in the area, and he could not get out to make phone calls. And it's a real safety issue when you have people who aren't experienced with working with tools that could easily hurt themselves pretty critically to not have the ability to make a phone call. So I think cell phone coverage is very important for our community.
Mr. Miles, this was a question in the last debate I did 2 years ago. What are we going to do to finally rid this problem for Germantown?
I think public safety is a primary concern for our community, and I think people need to be able to make 911 phone calls, and that's a top priority. So I agree with Brian on that, and I agree that we need to have that accessibility to our residents.
So as an alderman, I guess, what are you prepared to do to make that happen?
To meet, I'm sorry?
What are you prepared to do to make sure that the cell phone service in Germantown gets better?
I'm willing to meet with residents, and I'm willing to make sure that we have that coverage.
Okay, and Mr. Motley?
Yes, I'm also for the cell phone towers, but also I'm interested in the safety issues on the 5G towers. I believe that not knowing how much damage that they can cause or if they can cause any, I believe that the 4G towers would be more suitable. But I'm definitely for the towers and the cell phone reception to get better.
Okay. I'll give you this next question. Oh, wait. Am I off here? Back to you. Sorry, Mr. Miles. This one was so well written, I'm just going to read it verbatim. If COVID continues and tax revenues continue to decline or shortfalls are identified in the city's operating budget or pension liabilities, how aggressive would you be before resorting to a tax increase? For example, would you increase taxes to address shortfalls as a primary means of addressing the situation, or would you cut funding to administrative areas of the budget or funded groups such as GPAC or the Chamber of Commerce before you'd raise our taxes?
The last thing I would want to do is raise taxes on Germantown residents, so yes, I would reduce funding.
Mr. Motley?
Definitely not raising taxes, and would always make sure that our first responders are funded, no matter what.
And Mr. UELEKE?
Raising taxes is a last resort. I think COVID, the impacts that it had on the community are still lasting and going to be coming forward, but I think it's important that we manage the expense side of the budget as much as possible. The city's done a pretty good job of cutting back in recent months to manage to the risks that we've been exposed to so far, and I think that the opportunity that's created by any excess helps us fund future projects and investments in infrastructure. So I think being responsible on the expense side is the first priority, and then making sure that we take care of not raising taxes is right there with it.
Mr. Motley, there's a lot of concern about Germantown Country Club and what's going to happen with that big piece of property, given its location in the heart of Germantown pretty much. I know that right now the commitment from the developer is that it will be single-family homes. People want to know, what are you going to do to make sure that it is not only meets that code, but also is aesthetically pleasing, and what's your personal commitment to that?
I definitely feel like if it was up to me, I would be hands-on with making sure that they follow everything that they promising that the citizens of what they would be doing, and always making sure that no one who is going to develop goes back on what they said to the people.
Mr. UELEKE?
So as a member of the Financial Advisory Commission, I was on the subcommittee that looked at the city's purchase potentially of the country club. So I have heard the concerns of residents firsthand that live around that area. I understand what they're worried about, and that it's important what goes there. I would be really interested in seeing what the developer proposes. I would love to see something that keeps in mind maybe something for some of our older citizens, because so many of our older citizens are having to move out to Collierville to hit retirement communities. So if there was an option there that had some age restricted, that would offer some benefits in a couple of different facets and potentially even reduce the number of kids that come out for schools. So I think it's important to engage in the process, to understand what's proposed, to be a part of those commission meetings that help shape the proposal, and that's what I'm committed to doing as being an alderman.
All right, Mr. Miles, Germantown Country Club. What can you tell folks at home who might be watching what your personal commitment is to making sure how it's developed?
Yes, I'd like to make sure that Germantown Country Club, remains as residential as possible. Single-family homes are what has been proposed, and that's the direction I'd like to see it go.
Okay. One question I got concerns from a citizen who's lived here for a while and says, I've never seen people complain so much on Facebook about a place that really has a lot going for it. We truly are blessed in many ways with having great public safety. Our roads are in great shape. Our bond rating could hardly be better. The Baldridge Award suggests a very well-managed city government. Our schools are among the best in the state. Would you agree that the way the city is run right now, there's not a lot that needs to be changed or improved upon, or not?
Well, there's always room for improvement, and that is very important to remember. So I think the city can improve its relationship with between the Board of Mayor and Alderman and the school board. I think that will help to take GMSD to the next level, because we have a great school system and there's no reason that it can't get any better. I think it's important to improve transparency in our government. I think there's a lot that we can do that would help people understand the proposals that come before this board, to help them feel more confident about the decisions that are being made by this board, and to understand the facts and data that are used to make those decisions. So as an alderman, I'm committed to helping change that conversation, to help people understand why decisions are being made.
Mr. Miles, how do you feel about how the city is run? The evidence would suggest pretty well right now.
Yeah, Germantown is a great place to live. I just think there's a disconnect between everyday Germantown residents and some of the initiatives going on in the city. Smart growth, 6-story, 8-story buildings popping up in different parts of our community. I think several residents feel like they aren't being heard or listened to. And I just want to make sure, as a future alderman, that everyday Germantown residents' voices are being heard, that we're making decisions that benefit their interests, and that Germantown remains the same quiet, safe residential community I grew up in. I think that's why people move to Germantown. They want to get away from Memphis, and they want Germantown to stay Germantown.
Mr. Motley?
Yes, I believe that people of Germantown need to have their voice heard, and there's nothing wrong with them speaking on Facebook or any other social message to make it heard.
Apparently not, because they sure do.
And that's what the Alderman board, that's what we're here for, is to hear them, any kind of way possible, so they can be heard.
You're not going to be surprised to hear that there's a lot of questions about schools either. We do have a great school system by most measures. Houston High School consistently has the highest ACT score in the state. So let me ask you first, Mr. Miles, what are your thoughts about the city's commitment, the city's financial commitment to help the school system, even though they are run by independent boards?
Yeah, I think it's important to maintain the best education. Houston High School is one of the best schools in the state, and we need to make sure it's fully funded.
Would you put more or less funding than it currently is getting?
I'd like to speak with the superintendent and the school board, but yeah, I'd like to have a better communication with them, and I'd like to meet their needs.
Okay, Mr. Motley, where do you stand on school funding?
I believe that schools in Germantown are the best schools in Tennessee, and I believe that whatever funding they need to continue to be great and amazing the way they are, I'm all for it.
All right, and Mr. UELEKE.
When I decided to run, one of the first things I did was reach out to all of the sitting school board members. I've even talked to the candidates for school board. I believe that the relationship that is built there is vital to understanding the needs of GMSD and addressing them. Since the city established the school district, the city's put in over $39 million worth of capital investments to help deal with capacity issues and with the deferred maintenance that was inherited from Shelby County. I think it's important that that relationship between the board continues so that we can keep addressing those needs and help fund and keep the funding in the classrooms where it needs to be.
Thank you. Mr. Motley, where do you stand on purchasing the Germantown named schools? I got several questions about that, and how aggressively should the Board of Aldermen pursue that, or has that horse left the barn?
I believe we should get them back. And that's just my personal opinion. And I believe that when we get with the citizens and get with the board and come up with a decision all together, my vote would be to make them Germantown. Anything to make Germantown whole again, what was ours, to make it great, the way it's continuing to be, I'm for it.
Mr. UELEKE.
That largely rests with Shelby County Schools. As much as I would love to see us get those schools back, we have to have a willing partner that wants to engage in a discussion to help make that happen. I think it would be a challenge, given the money that we've invested into Forest Hill Irene Elementary, that to purchase those schools right now, because we need our capital available for, infrastructure investments, public safety, and the existing GMSD schools. But if the opportunity came forward for us to purchase those at a reasonable price, I would most certainly entertain it.
And Mr. Miles.
Those are Shelby County schools. I'd love to get them back as well, but I feel that the horse has already left the barn. If they want to work with us, I'd be willing to work with them. But as far as I'm concerned, I'd like to focus more on our own schools.
All right, gentlemen, now it's time for your closing statements. As you know, you get 90 seconds to do so, and we had the drawing to see who goes first, and Mr. Miles, you're going first on this one.
Thank you. Thank you to Leadership Germantown. Thank you to Germantown residents who are watching this right now. People ask me all the time why I'm running. It's simple. I love Germantown. I love the people. I love the small town community that it affords us. But for me and so many others like me, there seems to be a disconnect between everyday Germantown residents and what's going on in our BMA meetings. And our Germantown is slowly but surely becoming less recognizable. I care about what our town becomes, and I could not sit back and just talk about it. That's what, instead, I decided to run for alderman. Your alderman must have integrity, honesty, transparency, and an unwavering commitment to you, the taxpayers. An alderman should always, I repeat, always put the good people of Germantown first. There's a clear distinction between me and the other two candidates. Let me be crystal clear. I'm against more apartments. I'm against mixed use, which we all know is a code word for apartments. I'll make sure our schools are funded, and we'll do all I can to push for more. Our kids deserve it. On November 3rd, if I'm elected to serve you as your alderman, I make this promise to you. I will always be available, always put your wishes first. I will always represent the office with integrity, and I will always advocate for transparency. Thank you for your time, and I respectfully and humbly ask for your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Miles. Mr. Motley.
Yes, I would love for everyone to know that this alderman board, what I'm trying to bring to it is diversity. I'm a hard-working individual that service people every day, and I will always make sure that the citizens of Germantown are heard first. If you choose me as your alderman, I will always fight for you. I will always make sure, no matter what, that your voice on every issue is brought forward to this board. And not only that, I will continue to make sure that the police department is funded, the first responders, all of them are funded, and the schools stay great and amazing the way that they are, and our neighborhoods will continue to be safe. And no matter what, I want everyone to know that if you vote for me, look at my website, voterodmotley.com, and click the like page and everything, and I will be right there for whatever needs that the city of Germantown need, and I will fight for them every step of the way.
Mr. UELEKE, your closing statement.
Over 4 years ago, my wife Beth and I had our first conversations about the potential of running for alderman. Since then, we have made it a point to be involved and to learn as much about the city and government processes as possible. Late last year, we made a family decision to pursue this. I wasn't recruited and I wasn't pressured. It was a decision that was made out of our love for this community. Together, we see the need for someone that is a GMSD parent, a homeowner, and has a strong financial background to serve on this board. Every year, we write this check proudly for our property taxes, knowing that it goes to fund our top-notch police, fire, and schools. As alderman, I will work to balance our investments in infrastructure, public safety, and education, keeping in mind the responsibility of writing that check. I will not allow overdevelopment to overwhelm our schools, public safety, or infrastructure. I pledge to change the conversation around development and to bring a new level of transparency to the process based on my 17 years of experience in strategic financial planning and analysis. I'm Brian UELEKE, and I humbly ask for your vote on November 3rd.
And I humbly thank all three of you for taking part in this forum tonight. We appreciate it so much and helping the citizens make their decisions. We wish you the best of luck on the campaign trail. Shaking a few more hands, knock on a few more doors, or you can't shake hands now, can we? You don't have to do that. But we appreciate it. And if you're watching at home, up next is position 5. Brandon Musso and John McCreary will be here, and we'll be ready here in just a couple minutes. Thanks again, guys. All right, we are ready to get started with position 5. This is the last open position that you'll see on your ballot. Again, if you are unfamiliar with the process, there are 3 open positions, positions 3, 4, and 5, and they're all 3 contested, and you will vote in all 3 positions. There is no geographic boundary to the Germantown Alderman seats, so that often creates some confusion, so clear that up first. So you should have an interest in all 3 races because you get to vote in all 3. So now we're with position 5. We have Brandon Musso and John McCreary. Actually, from left to right, it's John McCreary and Brandon Musso. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. My first question is somewhat of a softball. I just want to let you introduce yourself to the voters, why you're interested in the seat, why you want to serve in this way, and what distinctions you feel you have that make you the better choice than your opponent. We did a drawing, and Mr. McCreary, I believe, chose to get the first question. So, Mr. McCreary, why don't you do so?
Thank you, Richard. So I ran to make a positive difference, bring people together and provide a sense of community and bring the people in the community together. I was a little disgruntled with some of the negativity that I've seen in the past and some of the division, and I wanted to make a difference in that regard. I'd obviously like to have an influence on how our community is shaped over the next several years, serve the people of the community, basically a better place to live. I'd say my goals would be to have properly funded schools, get the Houston Middle School expansion done, good public safety, fire, police, give them all the tools that they need, listen to citizens' concerns, as well as short-term and long-term efforts to how we're going to handle infrastructure issues. So.
All right, and Mr. Musso.
Thank you. First, I want to say thank you to Leadership Germantown. Thank you for hosting the event. Also, a big thanks to everyone involved in the process. This has been quite the journey. And a big thank you to my family. This has been quite the experience, even though we've only been in the process for about the past month and a half or so. But the amount of passion and feeling around why to run and be a voice for the people, is talking to voters, hitting home homes, is they want a voice, and I want to be that voice. I'm your normal guy from down the street, but with my family, I've lost a lot of friends and family already running and going through this process. And to me, it seems like a lot of untrust and lack of confidence in government, and the people just want to be heard. It's not about a resume of a long buffet of achievements. It's not about a title. It's not about memorizing a bunch of facts here tonight. It's about being a voice and really being there for the people. So that's the basis why I'm running.
Well, let me ask you this next question. There's been a lot made of the 3-2 split on the Board of Aldermen, and the 3 votes that more often than not, almost unanimously sometimes, go with the mayor and the administration, and the 2 that almost very consistently oppose the mayor and the administration. Are you prepared to first of all, what are your thoughts about that division? Because it has gotten somewhat contested in the last 2 years. And 2, are you prepared to tell voters at home on which side you would probably fall more often than not?
I think you just hit it right there. Great question. Thank you. I think you just hit it right there. This is not about sides to me. It's been telegraphed as sides, and whose side are you on? I'm on the side of the people. I want a voice for the people. This side battle, feud, whatever you want to call it, of voting, or you think somebody voted just because the other person voted a certain way, that's not going to be what I stand for. I'm here for the people to listen. I'm not going to vote the same way as the board. I'm going to vote based on what I hear in the community. But it's not about taking sides. I think that's why we're in the position that we are right now. It's whose side are you on? I'm on nobody's side. I'm on the side of the people to do what's right.
Mr. McCreary, how do you stand on this?
I'm in the same boat in that I never liked the division that was caused by the continual 3-2 vote. I think there easily could have been some olive branches issued across for people to get along better and to create ideas that would help bridge that gap. I wanted to run for that exact same reason, to bring people together, to bring the community together, to not take sides. I mean, one of the biggest evidences for mine if you look at my signs that are all around town, they're out all by themselves. They're not in a coalition of three. They're not in a coalition of a group. My signs are sitting out on people's lots that I've earned their trust for 50 years as a resident in this city. And those signs sitting out by themselves are allowing me to be my own individual candidate and not a yes man for anybody and not to be on either side. I want to do what's right for the citizens of Germantown.
Okay, I'm going to ask you about apartments. Surprise, surprise. We know where things stand right now. Standalone apartments are not to be built in Germantown. Mixed-use apartments can be built in Germantown. There are a couple big projects in the pipeline on that. So I want to know, where do you stand on that particular issue, and what would you tell voters how you're prepared to vote?
I served for 14 years at the Memphis and Shelby County version of Planning Commission, which is Land Use Control Board. And the one thing I learned in that position was that you never prejudge an application or a case that's coming in. You judge it based on the merits at the time of the case that's before you at that time. And I think it's dangerous to generalize what you would and would not do regarding mixed use in general, in that we have needs for sales tax revenue that exceed what we need that come out of property tax revenue, and there's a need for some of those type of properties. It doesn't mean they need to be unabashed, doesn't need to be uncontrolled, but they certainly have a place, as we've seen. But we are going to have a balance of how those are developed and how those are done.
Mr. Musso, where do you stand on apartments?
I think that's the very important question, talking amongst the voters. With mixed use, we have apartments right now. We have apartments. People saying, do we need more? We have them right now. We have an infrastructure problem right now that we are struggling with, and we want to put more apartments. It doesn't make sense to me, the mixed use side. I think we have other issues that we need to look at first, but apartments, we already have them. I mean, we have a number of them already planned to be built. I think we have other issues going on, and we can look at that as we move. But for right now, we have apartments, and we have infrastructure problems that we're already dealing with. So,
I told other candidates this, and we'll follow up on this. So you have a little more. We can let this air out a little bit more. Full disclosure: I live in Thornwood. Love the mixed-use concept, being able to walk to a restaurant, and it's just perfect for where my wife and I are in our lives right now. And wanted to stay in Germantown when we sold our house, and it provided the perfect option for us for that. There are some pretty strict regulations on mixed-use development and what shape it can take. Can I pin you down a little bit more specifically, for example, on Carrefour? Do you know, prepared to say how you would vote for that particular development?
I think we need to look at that as a team when we're all up here and see what that truly is and what those plans shake out to be. To me, I moved here to Germantown for the schools and the services and safety. I didn't move here for the urban type of life. I moved here for the small town type of life. I do feel as though people, as far as residential, I do think we need to build out more as far as residentials and home ownership. That's one of my components, but that's not necessarily why I moved here for the urban feel. I moved here for that small town feel.
Well, Mr. McCreary, Germantown is zoned 90% residential, so this is not going to become an urban center.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that particular development, Carrefour, and mixed use?
Well, but one point of clarification on the previous question, because when you asked me the question, you asked about mixed use. When you asked the question to Mr. Musso, you asked about apartments. So it's a little bit different
Okay, yeah,
question.
good point,
So,
good point.
So I am not for apartments. I don't want that question.
And you're happy with the
returned.
standalone
I don't want
moratorium
standalone.
on?
I don't
right.
think that mixed use needs to necessarily incorporate many more apartments that we don't need. So a little bit different in how that question
Yep,
was posed.
yep, that's fine.
And so I was answering a question regarding mixed use. So I'm sorry, go ahead. What was your?
Well, just when it comes to the Carrefour project in particular, are you prepared to say how you would vote on that based on what you've seen or know about the plans?
I have seen nothing more as a citizen than any other citizen. It's what's on a Facebook video that lasts 30 seconds and maybe an article here or there, and it would be way premature to answer any questions regarding Carrefour. I don't know anything about the density, don't know what the mix is, don't know anything about it enough to make that decision.
We talk a lot about Germantown is landlocked now, and there's not many other ways to develop. But One of the voters who emailed a question said there are still, though, and a lot of people forget, large parcels of family-owned land, been around for generations likely, that are ready to come up for sale. And when that's happened in the past, developers hear from a lot of citizens who object to them. And the question was, don't people have the right and privilege, I should say, to sell their own property to whoever they want? Mr. Musso?
I think for sure they have that right. I would be concerned, and again, the people that I've spoken with, the people that, and walking the streets, people, I go back to that same small town feel. Of course they can sell, if you own the property, they can sell it to whomever. I think that people are more concerned about the overdevelopment here and the multi-use developments. For the people, I truly believe they like that hometown feel of, but they're free to sell it to whomever they want.
Mr. McCreary?
No question, people have the right to sell their property. That's a given right. I think one of the fallacies that is taking place right now is that the public or the citizens of Germantown feel like things are happening, a case comes in and it happens too quickly and it's a quick decision. One of the things I'd like to see us do is come up with a current land plan that identifies those future neighborhoods and parks and protect the existing homeowners and residents and establish a longer-term land plan that we can use to establish good zoning practices where we're not reacting quickly on a case-by-case basis. So I'd love to see us have a longer-term land plan that identifies those future neighborhoods. I think that's something we can do.
Let me ask you about cell phone service. There's a lot of talk about that and how inadequate it is. There's actually some public safety concerns about dropped calls and not being able to call 911 if they should need to, let alone call their wife and tell them they're going to be late coming home. We know there are a couple of towers in the pipeline. Mr. McCreary, people just want to know, is this something that you can personally commit to resolving this once and for all? Because it's been a frustration now for years and years.
Okay, so it's not that easy, but it is and it isn't. I don't know that you can quell what everybody thinks about every tower and every location, but I will say this. When I spent my 14 years on Planning Commission at Memphis and Shelby County, we had 50, 100 towers come in. And the Telecom Act does not allow a municipality to vote against a cell tower unless if the applicant proves that there is a need for that service. At the same time, I think the locations of those can be driven in a little bit better within the geographic area of the circle that they're saying requires service. Look, cell phones have become a utility. Gas, water, electric, and cell phones. They are a utility. They are needed. Your grandmother, your father could be having an event. 90% of the phone calls that come into 911 are on cell phones. And those services are needed and need to be provided.
All right, I saw you raise your finger like you want to say more on the last issue, so if you want to take up some of your time for that, you can. But the question on the floor is cell phone towers and what you can personally promise voters you're going to do to help resolve that issue.
Sure, the one thing I wanted to say with the previous question, I think a lot, of course, it's your legal right to sell that land, but I think the current issue is the transparency and the communication, the change management, how that is all communicated here. So I think that has lacked in the past of being transparent of why decisions were made, what the vision is, and communicate with the people. So I think that has been a big part of the change management piece that's missing. In regards to cell phone, look, whoever thought you'd have to ask that question when you bought a house, how's the cell phone service? But it would be a question of mine. I mean, this directly affects me. My neighbors laugh at me all the time. They see me down the street, taking a left with my hand up, leg up. I have to walk out of my house to use a cell phone. We donated to the firefighters a couple weeks ago for donating the boot. Just getting some advice from those guys and hearing what they need to say. The biggest thing is they can't, their calls drop in certain areas. They can't even service the community. So it's a problem. It's real.
Okay. Germantown Country Club, I know you're getting questions about this on the campaign trail. Mr. Musso, where do you stand on how that should be developed? We know that the developers have promised it will be single-family homes, but maybe expand on that a little bit more in terms of retaining the character, the aesthetics of that development, because it is a big chunk of land.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I think it's a primary concern of our constituents and my family. I literally live blocks away from that country chorus. Now, let me just be first to say I was completely disappointed with this administration regarding the communication of how that came out. Me as a citizen, a taxpayer, I deserve more respect than hearing it from the alderman didn't even know about that purchase of land. As a property owner, how that all came out was terrible. And again, that goes back to the transparency piece. If there's a vision for that property and the fact that those plans aren't going to come out until after the election, again, I'm directly affected by this. So I would like to see it used for what the people want. Of course, we need to be smart, but that's why we're here as a team to work together. But I tell you, that communication of that piece and the lack of management of the communication, the lack of transparency, I think that's why we're in the situation we are.
Mr. McCreary.
So somebody has the right to sell their land, and if I sell my land to you, you can close it and you can own it. And there's no need for you to come to the Mayor and Board of Aldermen because you happen to buy a big piece of land. The only time the aldermen need to be in on that or be involved in that or be party to that is if that piece of land is going to be brought in for zoning, rezoning, or development, and a plan or master plan or PUD put together for that property. So I don't think it's a lack of transparency at that moment in the transaction. There could be some transparency issues once the case comes in. What I will say is that we've got 20 acres of land, or 20 square miles of land in Germantown. 17 of it is residential, 3 is commercial. I'm not for expanding the commercial footprint of what we have at all. I'm being vilified that I would, but I can promise you I won't do that. I want to keep our 3 square miles where they are and be more efficient with that. The country club's going to have to be weighed in when that case comes before us, because until it's brought in for rezoning or through a subdivision situation, we don't have a chance to look at that. So we'll view that when we get to it.
Okay. This next question, as I've said to the other candidates I like so much, I'm just going to read it verbatim. If COVID continues and tax revenues continue to decline or shortfalls are identified in the city's operating budget or pension liabilities, how aggressive would you be before resorting to a tax increase? For example, would you increase taxes to address shortfalls as a primary means of addressing the situation, or do you think it would be time to cut funding to administrative areas of the budget or funded groups such as GPAC or the Chamber of Commerce before raising our taxes? Mr. McCreary.
So, you know, COVID right now is a fairly underestimated, the result we don't know yet. We're in the throes of it. I think that's going to be a weekly, monthly, and quarterly issue for every board in every city, every school, everybody who's dealing with a budget is going to have to deal with COVID. I don't know that that question can be answered on what you would do, because we don't know what that answer was in April. We don't know what that answer was in July. We don't know what that answer is right now. I don't think that property taxes on the residential homeowner has to go up. I think what we have to do is be more efficient with the existing commercial zoning that we have to drive good businesses into those locations so that we can increase our sales tax revenue, which will subsidize the ability for not having to raise property taxes for homeowners. COVID could have an implication on that, and we'll just have to see how that goes. We don't know what the vacancy rates will be. We don't know what lies ahead.
Mr. Musso, COVID and its impact on the budget and tax dollars.
I think it's a very good question. I completely agree. And I agree with a lot of what John said. I think we're in uncharted waters still to how this thing is going to play out. I do question the sales tax revenue piece. So I think we need to be concerned of that based on the budget and what that does for our city. However, I think we need to take a deep look into our spending as well. And we need to provide what we can do as a city and see where we can control our expenses. We're spending too much. I think we need to really look at where we're spending money, what needs to be done, what businesses need to be helped, and how we can do that, and where we can cut from before we raise any type of taxes.
Next question. Despite the carping and venom that we see on social media about living in Germantown, is honestly, most people I think would agree we're fairly blessed to live here. Our public safety is second to none, among the safest in the state. Our roads are in good shape. We have a AAA bond rating. Our schools are among the best in the state, if not the best in the state. The city won the Malcolm Baldrige Award as being one of the best, well-managed local governments in the country. There's a lot to be proud of here. Do you agree with that assessment? Because when you watch and look at social media sites, it seems like a lot of people find an awful lot to complain about. Mr. Musso?
Being stuck in a room with John for the past 2.5 hours, we've talked about quite a bit. I think we both agreed whoever wins the seat or gets elected, we're going to put a social media block on Germantown. It has been quite the experience, like I said, when I mentioned that statement, journey for my family. I mean, it is truly a wave of craziness. That's how I've wrapped that up. I do believe this is I moved here for safety, schools, and the services that are here. I love where I live. I love the city of Germantown. We feel the safest we've ever felt, no matter where we've lived. I want to protect that. Again, I'm before you as my kids go to Germantown schools. Amazing. That's why we're here. And I will do anything to help anybody else get that same experience. But it is truly the best place to live, and I want to help protect that.
Mr. McCreary, social media Germantown or real Germantown?
I believe that the social media negativity is a very vocal minority. I think that the citizens of Germantown, in the majority, and the citizens of Germantown that live in our community are happy with the services that they're provided. In any situation, you're going to have a vocal minority. It doesn't matter what organization you're in. Facebook and all those things give people an uncontrolled ability to say whatever they want, throw paint on the wall with no regard for any accountability. So it's very difficult. We talked about the fact that it's hard to listen to some of the stuff that's written about you when you know it's not true. But regardless, look, I've lived here for 50 plus years. I'm part of the fabric of this community. I grew up in Poplar Estates. I go back to 2 police officers, the same 2, a number that are sitting in here now who ran the whole city. And I'm invested in the community. I think we're a community of choice, and I think that people want to live here. We have the best of so many worlds, and I just want to make that better.
Because schools are important, they're very much top of mind when it comes to voters and their questions. My information is that since 2014, when GMSD was formed, the city has contributed $60 million to GMSD for various expenses. Do you feel that the city contribution to the school system should be more than it is, less than it is, or the same as it is right now? Mr. McCreary?
I think the $50 or $60 million was the initial influx to get it started. I think state funding runs the schools on a continual basis, and then Germantown helps assist with that with
for things like athletic complexes and
capital projects and things like that. So whatever we have to do to provide excellence in education, give these kids every chance that they can get, the best teachers, the best facilities. We inherited some facilities from the county that probably have some deferred maintenance that we need to deal with. So we need long-term and short-term plans for that. We need to know how we're going to fund those things. We need to work closely with GMSD on current and future needs. And one of the things that I'd like to propose back is the joint meeting. They used to meet. The Germantown Municipal School District, Mayor and Board of Aldermen used to meet, and they don't anymore. And one of the first things that I'd like to propose is we go back to that joint meeting, because you get results from something like that. You get results from working together and finding out what your common goals are.
Let me follow up with you, though. More, less, or the same as they currently help out the school district?
I think we're going to have to give them additional funding, and first place to start is the expansion of Houston Middle School. Imperative's got to happen, and we need to make that happen.
Okay, Mr. Musso, to you now.
It's a great question. I'll go back to why Germantown's attracted to a lot of people. Schools are in their top 3. It was top 3 for my family. My kids attend Germantown schools. The first thing I've heard, common consensus of anybody I've talked to with the school board or anybody who supports the school board, is the number one thing that they want is to pull the same wagon. They want for the Board of Aldermen to be on the same page with the school board and communicate. That's what a lot of this is, and that's what drives me nuts going through this process is it's communication, I think, and transparency. That's the number one thing I hear from even somebody on the school level. But I think more is needed. We have a huge problem at Houston Middle. We got Dogwood that's probably going to have to be renovated. I heard somebody walked into Dogwood the other day that said it looked exactly like it was 30 years ago when I was here. So we're going to have to continue to invest in our schools. That's why our property value, that's what makes Germantown Germantown. And we got a huge problem at Houston Middle.
All right, so we're having enough trouble helping the schools already under the GMSD umbrella, but there are still a lot of people who wrote in saying, where do you stand on purchasing the Germantown named schools, or do you feel that that horse has left the barn, so to speak? You first.
Repeat the question, I'm sorry.
Should the city make an effort, and would you as an alderman make an effort to purchase the Germantown name schools, Germantown High School, middle and elementary school?
Look, I think that needs to go hand in hand with the school board. I think we need to discuss that amongst the Board of Aldermen and with the mayor. I think we also need to discuss that with our constituents to see what the best plan would be. But I think that decision would go hand in line with the school board.
Mr. McCreary.
I'd like to see it happen, but I think what was your term? You said the ship has sailed or
Whatever, yeah.
cows out the gate.
Mixed metaphors all over the place.
I don't know that we're going to get that back. It should be visited in the future. In light of all the questions we've just talked about COVID, all the different issues that we're facing right now, I think we need to deal with the hand that's been dealt to us. We need to get the schools we currently have up and running, get the deferred maintenance handled, get these schools the best they can be, get Houston Middle School addition done, and get ourselves in a position to deal with the assets that we own now. And then we'll worry about buying those schools once. You got to get your house in order before you can start going out trying to buy somebody else's house. So I think we start right there.
All right, candidates, that is the last question. It's time now for your closing statements. We had a drawing for that. Mr. McCreary elected to go last, so Mr. Musso, you go first with your 90 seconds. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you again so much for hosting, and thank you again, Leadership Germantown. Thank you to the city of Germantown for being here before you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. This election is so crucial for the future. It'll shape our future here in Germantown. We have to be transparent. We have to have the hard work, the integrity, the core values, and the big issue for me is transparency, communication. The people want to be heard here in Germantown. The number one thing is to come out and vote. We have to show our faces. And I want to end with a quote, John, and this is to all the people who can make a difference. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs and the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify them, but the only thing you can't do is ignore them because they change things. They push the human race forward. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius because the people who are crazy enough that they think they can change the world are actually the ones who do. I want Germantown to think of that quote when they vote, that you can make a change this election cycle. We need to be heard. The people of Germantown want to be heard. We have to perform the change management that's needed. We have to be transparent. We have to tell the people why we did things. It's all about being a voice for the people for me.
All right, thank you. Mr. McCreary?
I have lived, served, and volunteered in Germantown for 50-plus years, and I'm deeply woven into the fabric of this community. Germantown's a city of choice. I graduated from Germantown High School. I chose to come back after college and raise my family, start my business in Germantown. I spent 5 decades in this town preparing for this role as alderman. I'm going to rely on my business experience, my volunteering in Germantown, my time served on other boards, my experience, my knowledge as an entrepreneur to benefit the residents of our community. I mean, I've listened to our citizens for a lifetime. I know what Germantown is, or was. I know what Germantown is, and I feel like I've got a vision of unity and future success for its future. So I intend to represent the citizens in a straightforward, professional manner. We desperately need that right now. I'm a regular citizen like you guys. I'm not a politician. I don't like the division and negativity that I've seen. It's why I ran. I got up off the couch, said I'm going to go try to make a difference. So I ask the residents to please join me. Let's work together. Let's progress wisely. Let's be the best in every category. Let's be efficient, be successful, create plans to improve our sustainability at all levels over time. Let's create an environment where others can live, work, play, and dine and shop in Germantown. Let's simply be the best, and let's do that together. And I humbly, honorably, and with great conviction and resolve ask that you vote for John McCreary for position 5.
All right, Mr. McCreary, Mr. Musso, thank you so much for having such a well-behaved debate. I have to tell you, all three of them were just awesome. It was great to be a part of that, and I think voters learned a lot about the candidates, where they stand, and hopefully help make a decision. The election is going to be here before we know it. Early voting, I believe the deadline to register to vote is October 5th, and then the voting starts not long after that. So I encourage you to do so if you have not yet done it. I will put in a plug for local24.com, localmemphis.com, I should say. Great voter guide there, links to everything you could possibly want to know about what you need to vote regarding registration, absentee voting, early voting, all of that. Appreciate you being here and hope you are able to help make a decision based on what we were able to discuss tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.